Cyphers. We used to be called sorcerers, a rare breed of being that could wield mind-controlling powers. In reality, we could control electrical impulses, but we didn't come into our own until the first real computers were invented. Then we became tech gods. While we are still at an advantage to most, even those days are past now. Now, we're a curiosity in a world where tech bridges all the gaps and has mostly replaced magic. My name's Ulf Whitlock. I'm one of a small number of people who has inherited the powers of the Cyphers. I'm also a hunter. I track down criminals for the government and that juicy paycheck. I even have my own badge. I take on all types: orcs, elves, goblins. Shoot first, ask questions maybe. That's how Dad did it, it's how his dad did it, and I'm one for tradition. Welcome to the world of cybernetics and the punk. To my world of magic, blood, sweat and steel. Welcome to the Cyphers Edge. I hadn't met another Cypher in years. We were not a common breed. Someone once told me only about 1 in 25,000 people were born with this natural talent. And to have that level of ability, to bypass all of Les's tech and knock him out cold in a wink, this guy was some serious shit. I tried not to display how shocked I was, but I was. There was no getting away from that. Despite my efforts, he saw the worry in my expression. "Don't worry, he's fine." He began to pace from side to side, his attention all fixed on me now. "Thank you for bringing me a police officer. I could use one of them. As for you, though." He paused. I sensed him smirking under the helmet. It was implied in the casual tone in which he spoke and his too relaxed stance. "A hunter," he continued. "Not unexpected, but surplus to requirements." "So why even draw me here?" I said, somewhat distracted. He shrugged. "I just don't like people asking questions." I composed myself and resisted a huge urge to scan him. I didn't want to give anything away, not yet. "What did you do with the woman outside the club?" He tilted his head to the side. Quizzical. "You saw that, did you?" He nodded. "Of course, the security cameras," he said thoughtfully. "She had knowledge I needed. It was such a shame she couldn't survive the experience." This made no sense to me. Whatever he was talking about, taking knowledge, it wasn't a skill I'd ever heard of. "What knowledge?" I asked, glancing at Les's limp form from the corner of my eye. "I'm sure it wouldn't interest you. Just know that I won't put you through the same experience. Only so much room on the hard drive." He tapped the side of his helmet with 2 fingers. I was waiting for him to make a move, to draw a weapon, something. But he just stood there, calm, smug. "So what now? You gonna knock me out too?" He raised his hand as he spoke. "I was keen to see what kind of a person was asking questions. I was hoping for someone more useful." He chuckled. "Sorry, Hunter, but you're just not important enough." The line of hieroglyphics reappeared on the front of his hand and started to scroll through the air like code, appearing at the base of his palm and dissolving at the fingertips. "Good night, Hunter." I felt the shock of his intended invasion as the magic hit me like a wave. This wasn't like hacking someone's mods or CPU, this was different. This wasn't what I did. Not usually. This was straight up raw Cypher magic. I wasn't sure what to expect, but it was like a high-pitched screeching in my ears. My temples throbbed, it was incredible. I buckled over, falling to my knees and clamped my hands over my ears. The pain didn't stop. The sound didn't cease. Instinctively, I conjured up the magical equivalent of firewalls. I'd only had used them twice before in my life. I was rusty. The sound abated somewhat, but it still rang in my ears, like a mirage made audible. I'd never fought another Cypher before. Not like this. His voice arrived in my mind, shortcutted past my ears somehow. "Oh, I didn't expect this. How interesting." I tried to hold back a scream of pain, gritted my teeth, closed my eyes. "Maybe you are worth the effort after all." I opened my eyes, tried to stand, but a secondary wave hit me and I almost hit the floor. He started to walk towards me, casual, confident, slow. I like your attitude, I'll give you that. He leant in close, his tone mocking as he spoke through the helmet this time. But did you really think you could come in here with good intentions and a single cup and force answers out of me? I hissed through gritted teeth. No, why do you think we swept the building first? He tilted his head, considering me, then turned and I could tell he was scanning for energy signatures. I don't care how good you are, I said, letting my satisfaction leak through. You'll never get them all. The first explosion rocked the building. A second in the hallway behind me, the chain continued. I wasn't dumb enough to put timers on bombs, or relays, or detonators. This was a modified dead man switch. I just had to stop concentrating. For the first time since he had walked on stage, he looked worried. You could see it in his body language. His head whipped from side to side with every explosion. Exasperated, he drew a gun from his right coat pocket, leveling it at my head. Touché. A shot rang out. The stranger rocked to the side. I looked up to see Les hanging over the side of the balcony above, carbine in hand. He looked weak, but he was awake. Another shot ricocheted off the helmet, its ballistic armor living up to the reputation. He turned the pistol on Les and let off 6 shots in quick succession. Les didn't even flinch, taking the shots on his body armor like a pro. 2 more shots from the pistol while Les lined up another shot of his own. The carbine fired a 3rd time and the pistol spun from the stranger's hand. At the same time, a huge explosion rocked the stage. Our adversary turned and fled. The pressure that had me on my knees was released, and I drew in a long, ragged breath of smoke-filled air. Les struggled to his feet and let off 2 more shots in the direction of the stranger. Both sounded like they impacted on body armor. I got to my own feet slowly and looked around the carnage we had released. Time to go, I yelled over the explosions. Les vaulted the railing and landed on the floor a few meters away from me. He staggered, still disorientated, but he didn't slow. No point admiring the fireworks, he said, picking up speed and making for the same side exit the stranger had left through. He grabbed my shoulder as he ran past and dragged me along behind him. Les kicked open a door and we ran through a hall filled with smoke. I coughed loudly as I gasped for air. I could just make out a broken window ahead at the end of the hall. Les didn't even hesitate, jumping headfirst through the opening and rolling to a ready position in the alley beyond, gun up, sighting around him for any surprises. I jumped through after him. I hit the ground and managed to pull off a painful roll. I scanned my surroundings, but there was nothing to greet us. Whoever the guy was, he'd made a fast getaway. I massaged my temples and coughed up smoke, somewhat regretting the decisions I'd made 20 minutes ago. We stumbled to the car, leaning against it for support. I could hear sirens in the distance. Sounded like fire engines and police. Les sighed loudly. Shit, we need to leave. I shouldn't be here. I'm inclined to agree with you, I said, jumping into the passenger seat. Les threw his helmet on the back seat with the gun and dropped his foot to the floor. The car ripped away from the curb and we were lost in traffic in moments. Les drove in a far more controlled manner than I would have expected, trying not to draw attention to ourselves. I knew that people would have seen his car outside the building before it blew, but eyewitness accounts were far less reliable than you'd expect. Cars had been slowing down to take a look at the explosions, their attention focused on the building, not one car in 10 pulling away from the curb. That wasn't interesting. Les didn't seem concerned at all, not outwardly. I coughed, my throat still dry with smoke. I noticed Les rubbing his forehead, like he had a headache. You okay, mate? He nodded and put both hands back on the wheel, gripping it hard. Yeah, just a bit shaky. He paused. The way he just reached in and switched me off, I could feel it like fingers poking around inside my mind. I didn't say anything. I'd done similar things to people in the past. I knew what they said I felt like. It was different for me, though. When he had reached for me and found my mind shielded, he had tried sheer force. It had been less invasive, more like holding back a truck. What was he doing before I shot him? I coughed again and then steadied my breathing. He was trying to break me. There was a long silence as we both replayed the events that we'd just fled from. He seemed strong. Les asked the question hesitantly. He sounded like he was asking me a more deeply personal question. Oddly enough, I felt like it was kind of personal. For some reason, it felt like he was asking why I had failed. He was, I said at last, more than he had any right to be. We pulled up outside the court. Les offered to come up to the apartment and start digging into some research, but I sent him home. Firstly, he needed sleep. He had work again at midday. Secondly, it was early morning and I didn't know what kind of a state Fia would be in. We hadn't touched base this evening. She could be up watching vintage cartoons or trying to tear chunks out of her bedroom walls. I made my weary way up the stairs and hesitated at my door before unlocking it and stepping through. As I opened the door to our apartment, there she was, sitting cross-legged in front of her many screens, headphones on, cartoons playing, a bag of corn chips in her lap. I strode past her and dropped into my favourite comfy chair. Its torn leather and sunken cushions felt like a warm hug. She pushed back her headphones and held out the bag of chips. "You look like shit," she sniffed the air, "and you smell like smoke." "Thanks." I grabbed a handful of chips. "If you tell me you weren't involved in that playhouse burning down, I'm going to call bullshit." I frowned. "How did you know about that?" She held up her middle finger. "1, you smell like smoke, explosives, and Les's car." She flipped up a second finger. "2, you have burn marks on you." I looked down at my clothes and sighed. "And thirdly," she said, jerking a thumb at the screens now showing news coverage of the fire, "I watched the news." I leant back and watched the screen as the reporter spoke of potential gas leaks, punks playing around with homemade bombs. I thanked the gods that no one cared enough to do a proper forensic inspection of the incident. At least they had drawn all the wrong conclusions. It wasn't like I was going to lose my job for something like this, but I didn't exactly enjoy the dressing down I would have gotten from my agent handler. "What the fuck happened?" Fia asked, letting some real concern leak into her tone. "You were meant to be hunting for leads, not blowing up buildings." I rubbed my eyes and sighed. I felt like I was ready to pass out in my chair. My body ached and my mind was fuzzy as everything caught up to me at last. Even continuing the conversation felt like an effort. If I could blink my way to bed right now, I would have. I sighed again and forced my eyes to focus on her, then filled her in on what had happened between mouthfuls of chips. She sat patiently, not asking any questions, just getting the story. "That's impossible," she started to say at last, then trailed off. No, it's not. There's plenty of other ciphers out there." "No, that's not what I meant. I mean the raw power. No one can pull that kind of move that he did on Les without contact." I shrugged. My back reminded me that I needed a hot shower and I was long overdue for bed. "I don't know what to tell you. It was like nothing I'd ever experienced." She munched down on a handful of chips, eyes focused far away as she mulled over the story. I knew she wouldn't go to bed now. Like Shaky said, she was a hunter, but to her, prey was information, and now she had a scent to follow. "I need sleep," I said, and forced myself to my feet. I took a short and yet at the same time incredibly long walk to the bathroom and made sure I didn't fall asleep under the shower. I didn't even remember making it to bed, but it sure was good to lay down at last. The last thing I heard as I drifted off to sleep was the sound of Fia typing feverishly. I woke up to the smell of fresh coffee and the sound of Fia singing along to early 2000s heavy metal. If she hadn't slept, I wouldn't have been surprised. She was in her element when she was in research mode. I rolled out of bed and stumbled to the bathroom, then made my way to the kitchen. Fia didn't stop her rendition of Wolf and Man by Metallica, and I smiled as I poured myself a healthy breakfast of iced coffee to go with some day-old pad thai. I sat back down in my chair and stared at her, letting her finish the song. She pulled her headphones down after a moment and grinned at me. "I have found stuff," she said, eager to tell me everything. She looked half feral when she was in these kind of moods, and I looked from her teeth to her nails. They were noticeably elongated. She hadn't noticed. She was too focused elsewhere. There was an extra growth of hair high on her cheeks, and her ears were more pointed than usual. I grinned wide, then tapped my own canines and raised an eyebrow. She paused in her excitement, looked down at her hands, then felt her teeth. "Shit." "You need to watch that. You know how you get." There was silence, except for the faint sound of music still pouring from her headphones. She ran her hands over her face and ears. Yeah, I know. Just give me a sec." She was probably fine, but I had to point it out. She had let it creep up on her before, and it hadn't ended well. She relaxed, crossing her legs, settling into a meditation of sorts. Fia's grasp on her lycanthropy affliction was a knife edge. She could go weeks without an incident, then try and tear her room apart without any apparent trigger. Werewolves were famously chaotic by nature. The government supplied biochips, and they would cover the cost to tattoo a series of magic-imbued symbols across the infected person's body if they so chose. Most people only needed one or the other. Most people went their lives not having to worry much about it. Even with both, Fia was unstable. It was also the reason that she had no cybernetics. Shapeshifters couldn't augment their bodies. When they changed, let's just say it wasn't pretty. I gave her all the time she needed. After a few minutes, I saw the claws on her fingertips shrink back into human nails. Her top lip lifted slightly as she ran her tongue across her teeth, back to normal. The hair dissipated, her ears shrunk back to a half-elven form. "Sorry, I was just so focused," she trailed off. "It's fine," I nodded to the window. "Still." We both knew that if she wanted to, she could shift in full daylight. It would hardly even slow her down. Fia collected herself and regained some modicum of excitement. "You'll never guess what I came across. I was digging through the old myths about ciphers. There's lots of crap in there. Fear-mongering from the Dark Ages, the ability to kill with a thought, control hordes of people as private armies." She waved a hand, dismissing all this. "We all know that that's exaggerated from less impressive truths." I shrugged. "I don't know. Dad always said there was levels of untapped skills that had been forgotten." Fia rolled her eyes. "Dad liked myths and legends." She grabbed a screen and pivoted it towards me. It showed old news clippings, very old, from back in the 1950s. The headline read, "Serial killer of Northampton caught. Cypher sorcerer to face the noose." "Read it to me," I said, squinting at the screen, too lazy to bother. Fia grinned. "It was an old case. The cipher in question was killing people by allegedly draining their life force. He claimed he could take their memories." I thought back to what the stranger had said. He said the girl, the one from the security camera footage, had knowledge he wanted. "Exactly," Fia agreed. "Everyone thought this guy was insane, but he spat out some personal information at the trial. Stuff that there was no way he could possibly have known. The government at the time hushed it up. They were scared of copycats." It was insane. Surely if it had been possible, someone more recent would have figured it out. Still, it was the only thing that actually made any level of sense. It's a scary thought, if it's possible. "What if Dad wasn't wrong about the old myths?" Fia said slowly, voice low like she was explaining a conspiracy theory. "What if the prosecution of the ciphers was so bad they had to hide their abilities? Then, over generations, they've become lost." I ran some of the more crazy legends about my kind through my mind. "I guess," I said slowly, "the wizards are always rediscovering old spells that have been forgotten." The wizards had just as many crazy stories from back in the Dark Ages and the race wars as we had. Their desperate need to keep up with technology meant that they were always pushing the envelope. Every month they were claiming they were uncovering old spells to reinvigorate the magic community. I shook my head, pushing the speculation aside. "Any leads on the mark though? Any ciphers showing up around here out of nowhere?" She shook her head and pivoted the screen back to its regular position. "Sorry, nothing statewide, not even over east. But that doesn't mean anything. Not all of you weirdos are registered." I should hit the streets again. "To hell you are," she cut me off. "But," I objected. She held up a hand. "You need rest. But if you want fresh air, I could use some lunch." I checked the time on my heads-up display and realized it was almost midday. I decided to humor her and got dressed to go out to get something to eat. We spent almost a week looking up leads and finding dead ends. I say we, Fia did most of the work. At the start of the week, I filed a report. Clearly the most exciting part of my job. I had to, unfortunately. Not even an hour later, I got a call from my agent handler. I received a solid talking to. My handler, Rio, had sounded more exasperated than angry though. It took some doing, but I convinced her to file it as classified and play it as close to the chest as possible for the time being. After that nail-biting event and the first couple of days dragged by, I went out on a quick retrieval mission for a bail jumper. A half-orc drug dealer with less brains than teeth. I got home from the quick excursion late on the 6th day. My jacket was torn, my jaw aching, and someone else's blood all over my shirt. I was just stepping through the door when my comm started to ring. It was Les, and it was a quick conversation. I stood, paused in the doorway, fear staring at me, waiting patiently. The call ended. "Well, what was that about?" I grimaced. "There's been another attack," I said, glad the stranger had shown himself again, but half doubtful. "The cops have a perp cornered in an apartment block." "That's good, right? Not the attack, obviously, but they have him?" "I don't know." Les didn't sound too confident, but he thought I should check it out. I'd quickly changed my clothes and headed out again. I was tired from the last job, sore, and probably not in the best condition for this. A cab dropped me as close to the police barrier as I could get. The cops were standing guard around an old run-down apartment block they had sealed off the street. They were ready to hold me at the holotape before I held up my badge. Begrudgingly, they stepped aside, and I stepped through the scrolling red ribbon hologram, with "Police, keep clear" running along it in white text. It gave a sharp beep as the beam was broken. A half-orc officer in his late 50s with the traditional white mustache and crew cut that I assumed all commanding officers received on promotion turned from his view of the building. He was grim-looking naturally, and it wasn't helped by the brass-coloured mechanical jaw below the mustache. He was well-built, my height but wider, with more muscle. "Who the hell invited you, Whitlock?" "Inspector Hammond," I greeted him with mock joviality. "You're not wanted here, Hunter," he said, breaking rank with his sergeants and meeting me halfway to the building. Really? Because I got notified that a suspect matching the details of a mark I'm hunting was sighted at this crime scene. He almost snarled and the sinister moustache twitched in annoyance. "Who notified you?" I grinned. Given my case is at a federal level and officially classified, I think I'll be the one asking the questions, Inspector. Suddenly I was very glad I'd filed the paperwork when I did. Anthony Hammond was a bastard, but he did things by the book. I could have sworn I saw his teeth grinding. "Who said this was anything to do with your case, Whitlock?" I stepped around him and looked up at the building. "The possibility of case connection is enough for me to assume jurisdiction of this crime scene." I faced him with no small amount of smugness, as you know full well. Hunters trump police in times of civic emergency. I strode towards the building, leaving him to fume silently. "And while we're being formal," I called over my shoulder, "it's Commander Whitlock." That was probably the most satisfying thing I'd done in months. I probably shouldn't be agitating him so much, but I was too tired to play back and forth with phone calls to my higher-ups and make it an order from the top down. He knew what the score was. If he had problems, well, they were his problems. I didn't usually have to deal with the inspector directly, or any police at that level. Rio usually smoothed out any admin between officers, and we stayed out of each other's way. Still, having been given the chance, I wasn't going to waste it. The apartment building was large, and halfway decent. You could tell some attempt had been made to resurrect it into something livable. I pointed to one of the sergeants, a female elf of indeterminate age. "So, fill me in. What's happened?" She looked behind me, not answering straight away, but looking for confirmation from her CO. I looked behind me to see Hammond in the middle of a call, gestating wildly, probably complaining to someone about me. "Officer," I said, pulling out my badge, "I've assumed command, as you can see from the inspector's pleasant demeanour. Bring me up to speed." She didn't look happy about it, but she explained the bones of the situation. "Well, we got a call, a man being attacked outside the building, on his way home." She held out a hand. I saw the NFC pad on her palm. Reaching out, hovering my hand over hers, I let her transfer the surveillance footage. A middle-aged man, human, was walking through the underground car park. A figure in a hood and a long coat appeared from behind the pillar, grabbed the man's head in both hands, and he fell to his knees. Before anything could happen, the man grabbed the attacker's wrist and the hooded figure looked like he was having a seizure. The victim struggled to his feet and made a break for it. The video cut out, and I shook my head, clearing my vision. "He fled inside," she continued. "The perp followed, the victim managed to get away, barricaded himself in his apartment. The residents heard shots fired. Apparently, the attacker is still inside. Security footage shows him on the 5th floor when we arrived, though a large portion of the residents from those floors and the one the attacker is on have fled. The power went out and the whole building has lost visuals." This was a close parallel. Les was right to call. "Any casualties from the shots?" I asked, showing my concern.
As far as we know, one young orc boy ran to help the victim. We don't know if he's still alive.
I groaned in frustration at people's eagerness to be stupid. So why are you lot in Hammond here? She paused.
You can't see it from here, but there was an explosion about 15 minutes ago in the 5th floor. We got here just before you did.
An explosion? That was not in the MO.
We don't know why or how. It was small, but it could have been anything really.
Have you sent in a drone?
We tried,
she said sheepishly.
It fell out of the sky, remotely deactivated.
I rubbed a hand over my face, trying not to show how tired I was. Okay, so how did the victim escape? He had him right there.
He tased the guy.
I was surprised. I didn't hide it either. He tased him. Really? The cop nodded.
Electrified limb augmentations.
Now that was odd. A cipher should not only see that coming, but one as powerful as the stranger shouldn't have even flinched. I took off my jacket, passing it to the sergeant, then rolled up my sleeves, not wanting to uselessly destroy another shirt. Cover the exits, I said coolly. I'll be live on the surveillance in the truck.
You're going in alone?
She asked, taken aback. It's good to show that you're concerned for the safety of other professionals, to show that you're competent and inspire a level of admiration. I would rather not risk anyone else just yet, I said, patting her on the shoulder. It's also good to keep cops out of my way. I strolled to the entrance, making the visual and audio link to the surveillance truck. Now, I just had to keep up this professional confidence all the way to the 5th floor. Thank you for listening to Cyphers Edge. Subscribe so as not to miss future episodes. Script and narration by J.J. Brandis. Music was provided by Kayor McLeish. Copyright J.J. Brandis 2024.